From Naples, Florida, this is the One Extraordinary Marriage Show, where being busy is overdone, romancing is fun, and scheduling sex has taken the guesswork out of wondering when you're going to get some. I'm Tony DiLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Elisa. From coast to coast and around the world, thank you for joining us. It's time to talk sex, love, and commitment. Give us a call or text us on the Hug Hotline at 858-876-5663, or send us an email to hugs@oneextraordinarymarriage.com. In today's episode, we're discussing what you saw and learned about touch growing up and the impact it has on how the two of you engage in physical intimacy.
Absolutely. And Dr. Nicole LePera had this to say about touch. She says, physical touch heals the nervous system. It strengthens the immune system. We're meant to touch and be touched on a regular basis, and not just in an attempt to have sexual intimacy.
Amen.
Amen. And that's what we're talking about in today's episode. But we start every episode here at One Extraordinary Marriage with a hug. And a hug is really an opportunity for us to celebrate what you're doing, to share your actions and your intentionality with the rest of the One family. And this hug comes from a comment that was on last week's post on the role of lingerie. This wife says, "For a fun little twist, I put something sexy and new on, took a picture, then wore it under my clothes for dinner with friends. I sent him the picture when he stepped away from the table and let him know I was wearing it at that moment. He came back pretty flustered and was ready to head home."
I love it.
This is that intentionality. It's action. It's, doing something out of the ordinary that creates anticipation and clearly a little bit of fluster.
I told Elisa when she shared this with us, or shared this with me, I was like, hey, idea for you.
But it's true. Like, those are little things that, when we think about the emotional and the sexual intimacy, it's just a fun way to flirt and have that romantic gestures and to just kind of set the stage for the rest of the evening.
Yep.
So,
and if you haven't listened to that episode, that was episode 826, The Role of Lingerie.
Mm-hmm. So the idea for this episode came because earlier this year in the Bold Wives Club, we were having a conversation about physical touch, and the conversation started to, as so many conversations do, start to go down. Well, what did you see growing up, and how did that impact you in your marriage? And so there was all this conversation going in and around amongst these wives, and kind of tabled it in the back of my head. And then Tony and I got into a similar conversation recently, and talking about how in so many areas of our life, we can, if we take the time to pause and reflect, we can see the direct impacts of our role models on our life.
And can I say something too? The past is the past. What we saw, what we grew up with, how our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, those who cared for us, whatever, we saw them. And yet, put yourself in that position now, and how are you showing up for the next generation?
Yes, and we have to identify what happened in the past.
True.
Before we can change, we actually have to know what we're doing.
Understand,
and
but
that's
I'm just
really
saying,
where this episode starts. So
right.
Yes, you are totally right. You're just jumping ahead to the end of the episode.
I know. I'm just saying, make sure as we're talking about this, though, how do you show up?
Yeah.
For the next generation. That's all.
Absolutely. Because if you think about some of the role modeling, and I hear this in coaching clients, I'll have somebody sit across from me on Zoom and say, well, my parents, or a parent was a yeller. They were really loud and vocal in arguments. And it turns out that I'm the same way. Or I chose to do the opposite, right? We can get into this place. Or I had a parent that was super frugal. And so I've learned how to be frugal, and I'm just really tight with my finances. And that's how I do, financial intimacy. Or I had a parent who just avoided conflict, Lisa. And so that's really comfortable for me. And so I avoid conflict. And so we're pretty comfortable in, at least what I see in my coaching clients, we're pretty comfortable identifying what our parents did in those types of areas and how we respond or how we model that same behavior.
I was listening to a podcast recently with a clinical psychologist, and he was talking exactly about this. It was about your mind and money or something of that nature. And he was talking how, and he's done massive amounts of study, PhD work and all this good stuff, where there are two options most people will take from what they've seen their parents, grandparents, whoever, right? It'll be like they'll do exactly what their parents did or grandparents did, right? Like grandpa was a frugal guy, he saved. Or They go exactly opposite, and they'll go into the riskiest stuff and money options, penny stocks or whatever. So it's like this interesting thing in how he was talking about that. I'm like, oh my gosh. And as you were bringing up here, I think that happens on many of us. Like, our parents were yellers, but we no way will be.
Right.
Our parents had massive conflict, so we avoid it completely, and again, with money, you said as well. So I found that interesting, a clinical psychologist. We talk about this. Elisa sees it each and every day working with her clients, and you hear from clinical psychologists talking about this stuff. You're like, bingo.
Tony loves it when I'm validated. That's so awesome. That's awesome. But what about when it comes to touch? Right? We're so aware of these other areas, but do we ever take the time to stop and think, what did I learn? What did I observe? What did I see my parents do when it comes to touch? And what am I doing right now? How is that impacting my relationship with my husband and wife? And if we take it one step further, for those of you that have children, what are you modeling to them? What are they seeing? What are they going to be saying in 20 or 30 years about what the two of you did? It's a really interesting place to look generationally, not just, my wife didn't kiss me today.
Yep. And so in the 6 pillars of intimacy, we talk about physical intimacy.
Chapter 6.
That is chapter 6. It's one of the 6 pillars. Physical intimacy is your non-sexual touch. So let's make sure we understand this here, because something else out there talks a lot about physical touch, and a lot of people get confused that physical touch then means it has to be sex. In the 6 pillars of intimacy, we made it very clear that these are 2 very separate things. We can be physically intimate without having sex. We can have sexual intimacy and be physical and have physical intimacy. So I just want to be very clear here with what we are speaking about today, so you understand it's the kisses, it's the hugs, it's the cuddles, it's the pats on the butt, it's the holding of an arm, a leg, whatever that may be. And yet this doesn't necessarily mean it leads to sex.
Correct.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
And for me, growing up, like, one of my most treasured pictures of my parents, and it was actually before I was in the picture, it was when they were dating, but they're like cuddled up on the couch and they're like all kissy face, and my dad has always been very physically affectionate with my mom. I mean, they've been married over 50 years now. Like, you see it. I mean, even in their 70s, they're still like, they do hold hands, and he does kiss her all the time. And that was what I saw growing up.
And I would say your dad is more so that way than your mom is to your dad.
Correct. Correct. There's a little hint there.
No. I'm just saying, like,
yeah, he is definitely much more.
Mom and dad, they're different too. It's not like.
And if we take it back another generation, I can tell you, seeing how my grandparents interacted with one another.
Your mom's mom.
Mom's parents.
Yeah.
Like, kisses. I remember them kissing on like probably their 60th wedding anniversary or something like that. But like
they were less affectionate.
They were way less affectionate. On my dad's side of the family, Puerto Rican side, my grandparents had divorced, but there was always a ton within the family, just always a ton of physical affection, hugs, kisses, people sitting right next to each other, that kind of thing. So going back generations, I can see the differences, that this isn't just like, oh, well, this was just my parents type of deal. What about you?
Yeah. And then on my side, I think I've shared many a times, coming from an Italian family, it wasn't uncommon to, as a child, see, again, like Elisa said, from a family perspective, a lot of affection. As a child, and even into my high school years, if I walked into a room with my aunts and my uncles and my nonna, my cousins, and everybody around, you made sure to say hello to everybody. You gave everybody a kiss. I still remember this one but this one gathering. It was a wedding. And I was probably 8, 9 years old. There's probably 300 people there. And I remember walking into this building and just going, oh my gosh, this hall, huge. And my dad just looking at me, he goes, you make sure you go around, you hug and kiss everybody. And I'm like,
I'm out.
I did enough for where he could see me, and then I ran off. You know what I mean?
But what did you see with your parents?
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing, because from a family perspective, I saw it. From my parents growing up, I don't really remember seeing a lot of affection. I do remember seeing some kissing.
Yeah. Because we lived with them for a while, so
I understand. But I'm trying to go back into like those.
That's why I'm asking.
Middle school years, and I don't remember seeing a lot. And don't forget, Dad was also working out of the town I grew up in all week long because of construction and everything. So
Okay, so jump ahead when we were in our 20s because he wasn't working out of town. Like when I first.
yeah, I think as we all got older,
Yeah.
Dad began to there was a softening of Dad that began to happen that we saw, and Dad made it a point to kiss Mom. He made it a point to hug her, to be affectionate, to have fun, to have, to hold her hand and things of that nature. So as we were all growing up, I do remember seeing that happen and Dad just softening, which was beautiful. I mean, I think it impacted me still, even as an older man, seeing Dad do that. But as a child, elementary, middle school, I don't remember seeing them like we are. Like our kids see us kiss. Our kids see us, me grab your butt. Our kids, like, they see the hugs and the kisses and they see it. Like, right. I don't remember that growing up.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we asked the one family last week on Instagram. We said, hey, growing up, how did you see your parents touch one another? And I was very clear because we're talking physical, not sexual intimacy, to give suggestions like hugs, kisses, massages, back rubs, etc. And I also put on that story, I said, if you didn't see your parents engage in physical touch, share that. Because I'm just curious. I didn't want to exclude, and two, I just wanted to get a sense, a pulse on, like, what did you all see?
Yeah, what was their physical intimacy?
Right. And so far and away, kissing, hugging, and holding hands was very common. There were the pecks on the cheek, back scratches, arm touches. A couple people said dancing, massaging. There were the few butt smackers, which I totally appreciate because that's one of Tony's definite little like, hey, your butt is walking by me. Let me touch it. Cuddles, little pats. Somebody said lots of Dad reaching out and Mom squirming away. I've done that before. So that one. There were quite a few of you that had divorced parents. So you never saw your parents interact that way. But I will tell you, with all of the responses, far and away, and this actually, I told Tony when I was pulling all the data together, it actually left me speechless. Because more than all the kisses, more than all the hugs, more than all the hand holding that you guys saw, the vast majority of respondents didn't see their parents
be physically intimate
in any type of physical intimacy. And I literally, I was like doing all the data collection. I'm like, oh my gosh. This explains, like as a coach, this explains so much. Because I'm like, okay, if the vast majority of people didn't see it, then when we talk about how that impacts the two of you now, one, my light bulbs go off. I go, well, now I understand it. Because like some of you said, we didn't see our parents touch and we really don't touch either. Now the opposite side, we always show an affection in front of our kids. I catch myself giving hubby the same back scratches that Mom did to Dad. Sometimes we, like Tony was saying from that podcast I listened to, we do the exact same things.
Which is cool.
Absolutely. Somebody said, I've had to unlearn what I saw from my parents.
So from a negative, like I'm going to do the opposite of what I saw.
I've struggled with being physically intimate with my spouse. It's awkward for me. Somebody else said, I want my kids to see us be physical. And listen to the second half of this. That motivates me when I'm exhausted. That was a really powerful one because I was because it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm just tired. I don't want to.
Been there.
Yeah. Another response. I know what not to do from watching them. We learn so much. And, somebody even said, we're very physically intimate. Seeing it as a kid makes it normal. It's such a topic. Like, and I know some of you right now, whether you're in your car, you're out for a walk, or you're just sitting on your couch having a cup of tea, you're sitting there going, okay, but what about us? Right? Have you ever stopped to think about what you saw modeled and the impact that it's having on the two of you? And is it, I mean, if it's working, my goodness, keep doing it.
That's right.
But what if it's not working? And what if it's not working for one of you? right? It doesn't have to be like, well, we both aren't happy with this. What if one of you is saying, hey, this isn't working for me? What can we do about it? And we want to talk about those types of strategies after this break.
Are you a professional pillow fighter? Or a 9-to-5 low-cost time travel agent? Or maybe real estate sales on Mars is your profession? It doesn't matter. Whatever it is you do, however complex or intricate, Monday.com can help you organize, orchestrate, and make it more efficient. Monday.com is the one centralized platform for everything work-related. And with Monday.com, work is just easier. Monday.com, for whatever you run. Go to Monday.com to learn more.
Welcome to What's the Best? Today's contestant is Jane. Ready to win, Jane?
Absolutely.
First question, what's the best match game?
Best Fiends?
Correct. Where can you collect the best, cutest creatures?
Best Fiends.
Right again. And now for the bonus question. Which game celebrates 10 years with 10 days of exclusive Unreal gifts?
Best Fiends.
You nailed it, Jane. Tell our audience what they should do.
Download for free on the App Store or Google Play.
Best Fiends.
We're back, and we're talking about strategies to address the physical intimacy in your marriage. And again, I just, I know so many of you, just based on the responses that we got, didn't see this growing up. And I'm reiterating that just because I want you to know you're not alone. If you didn't see it and you don't know what to do, you're not alone. If you didn't see it and your only examples of it are TV and movies, let me just remind you all that is like super scripted. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always go as perfectly. Your spouse isn't always going to respond in the same way, like with a little snuggle in or a little, oh, that felt, thank you for touching me or giving me a hug or whatever. Like you might not always get the same movie responses. But what can the two of you create? It's like Tony said at the very top of this episode. The past is the past. You get to choose what your present and what your future are going to look like.
If you're breathing and living, you can make change. You can. And just in my story too, just even my dad. Again, that's a man who immigrated to this country, lived a tough life, didn't get past the 8th grade. My nana got divorced at some point or other. He didn't have a mom and dad at home. He was the youngest of 4 children. He worked his butt off. So I saw a man who really wasn't that affectionate towards my mom growing up. And yet as he got older, that changed. I said it. He softened. I noticed it. Mm-hmm. Like my dad would give, like growing up, I would give my dad like a little kiss on the cheek because that was just customary as an Italian growing up. That's what we did.
Yeah.
But as we got older and my dad and I had these moments, we would embrace each other. Mm-hmm. He never did that when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. Never. And for any of you who want to learn the story of my dad and him even saying, I love you to me, you can go all the way back to episode 6. Because that's where I talk about that journey of engaging my dad. Mm-hmm. And from that point on to the day he died, he would tell me, I love you, Tone. Yeah. And if he can do it, I know you can.
Absolutely. And, it's one of those things where you get to choose, right? You get to choose what you're going to create for your marriage and how the two of you are going to write your own marriage story when it comes to physical intimacy, right? We very deliberately, when I wrote the 6 pillars of intimacy, separated the two, like Tony had said earlier, because I wanted couples to understand that this idea of being physically intimate, the little touches, the hand holds, the back rubs, the foot rubs, the massages, the scratch my head, hold my hand, give me a kiss, all of that, like all of those things can be done on a regular basis, whatever that is for the two of you. But it's imperative that the two of you sit down and have a conversation and learn, what do we want? Mm-hmm. What helps us, like the quote at the very beginning, what helps us to better regulate our nervous system? Is it walking up? And I have done this at different times in my marriage when I have just felt so like out of sorts. I will walk up to Tony and I will just be like, I need a hug. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to talk. There's no emotional intimacy here. I've said all I need to say. I just need a hug. right? Because I recognize that does actually re-regulate my nervous system. It helps me just to like, oh, okay, I can calm down. But what does your spouse want? And can we stop digging our heels in and saying, well, I don't like to do that. I don't like foot rubs, or I don't like back rubs, or I don't want to do that for you. And step into a place where we actually say, you know what? If this is how you feel loved, if this is how you can feel close and connected to me, then it may not be my favorite. You might have to say, hey, babe, I will totally give you a foot rub, but I need you to wash your feet first. Okay, wash your feet. Don't make a big deal about it.
And this goes on even in our marriage. So believe me, when Elisa's speaking about this, these are things that go on in our own marriage and talking around physical intimacy and how do we connect, beyond that, holding hands, kissing, hugging, things of that nature. It's okay. Well, I enjoy this. You enjoy that. How do we engage with one another? Even though that's not something like I need or that I want, but Elisa really does. And so this is, in any of the pillars of intimacy, what can I do? Mm-hmm. What can we do? And when we look at those two questions, they lead to how are we strengthening this area, this pillar in our marriage? And again, intimacy is closeness and connection. So all we want to do here is how do we become more close and connected? And it may take baby steps. Mm-hmm. You may desire a foot rub every night. Your spouse just isn't into it just yet. So it may be once a week right now. I mean, there has to be, we can't, as much as we'd love to, as much as we would love to just be like, we've done nothing around this for months or years. And now I want I want the sundae. And not only do I want the sundae, but I want it to be a banana split sundae with the whipped cream and the cherries and the sprinkles. And we want it like that. Mm. And sometimes in marriage and in our growth and in our journey, it doesn't always happen that way. Mm. It's a step along the journey.
And I just want to remind, I would say the vast majority of you, that when you were dating, engaging in physical intimacy was something you did willingly, something you did with a smile on your face, something you did without keeping score or without, this expectation of reciprocity. You were just like, I just want to touch this person.
And what may be going in your mind right now, because it hit me as soon as Elisa said that, was, but I got hurt. But he or she did something to me. But this happened in my life. But. If there's a but after that, then go get help. Go address the but. Because if you don't, you're going to live in the same place you've been. And so as somebody who's having to deal with some stuff internally, I had a call with a buddy just last night, and it revealed to me that, you know what? I need to go get into some coaching. I need to go get to some counseling. You know what I mean? I need to get some healing in my life. And so hopefully this is something for you to go, oh, wow. Again, if you hear that but after something is said, then you need to dive into what the but is, and you need to address it. Trauma, whatever that may be in your life, the hurts, the pains, we need to get that addressed, because physical intimacy is going to allow the two of you to grow closer together. Mm-hmm. It is. And not just right now, but for the rest of your days. Mm. I think about those times. I want to make sure that Elisa and I are going on walk and talks when we're 80 years old. And believe me, we live in Naples right now, so the age demographic is a little older than what we were used to in San Diego, and especially the community we live in. Didn't know that when we moved into the community. It's okay. It's great. But we see these older couples.
There's a couple that lives on our street. They walk together every single day.
Holding hands.
They're the cutest.
And I look at that and I'm going, I want to be us doing that.
Except they walk in the middle of the day because I got a dog, and I'm still walking at 5:30 in the morning. I need it dark. That's the part of Naples I haven't adjusted to, walking midday. But it is thinking about that. And I said it earlier, for those of you that have kids, especially since so many of you did not see physical intimacy growing up. I'm going to ask you, what do you want your children to be able to say about you and the physical intimacy in your marriage? What are they going to be telling their kids? Because remember, I can go all the way back to my grandparents, right? I could probably even go to great-grandparents just because based on the stories that I've heard and the family lines and things like that. Tony and I know, on my side of the family anyway, have changed the narrative. Because I see it, I know our kids talk about it. I know our kids have complained about how like touchy-feely we are. Like, will you stop touching mom? Do you always have to smack her butt when you walk by her? Like all of the things. But the narrative is different. And our kids will not go into their marriages without an awareness of what physical intimacy is. How they craft it with their own spouses in the future, that will be their story. But it won't come out of a place where they never saw it. In their parents' marriage. And that has been deliberate, you guys. That's not just like, oh, well, you know, maybe we will or maybe we won't. It's as we've worked on our own marriage, we realize it's important for them to see it. And that was a conscious decision. But it's stepping into this and saying, we're not just having one conversation on this. You both might listen to the podcast this week. You might listen to this episode and say, hey, let's have a conversation about it. But it doesn't just end with that conversation. We continue to talk about touch. We continue to talk about the touches that are meaningful. It is something for both of you to engage on. And like one of the wives said in the Bold Wives Club last night, we just had a meeting. She goes, what if we were lifelong learners for our marriage? And I want to leave you with that when it comes to physical intimacy and what you learned about touch. What if you became a lifelong learner about your spouse and your marriage in this particular pillar of intimacy?
Well, we are going to end it on that, because what are you doing to become a lifelong learner? Using those 6 pillars of intimacy to strengthen your marriage, to have the extraordinary marriage you desire. So go out there this week, go make it happen. See what happens around your physical intimacy. Have that conversation. If you're somebody who does it already, just give your spouse that hug, that kiss, that handhold, and let them know you love them. If you're someone who hasn't been doing it in your marriage for a while, this is your opportunity to reach out to your spouse in a way that brings that physical intimacy into grasp. So with that, you guys have yourselves a fantastic week. We'll catch you next week from here in Naples, Florida. Love you guys. Thank you for listening to the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. If you love this podcast, please leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Your review helps others find the show and know that it's the right fit for them and their marriage.